I'm stuck inside a zipper, but I won't give up looking for my way out. I was so bored here this week that I decided to write a novel. It ended up pretty good, I think. Especially the twist at the end. You will lie if you tell me that you saw it coming.
John, the detective began, we need you to recount the entire story from start to finish. It seems everyone believes you are the group's leader and the sole point of contact with the mastermind behind the abduction, who goes by the owner. Unfortunately, the testimonies from the other 4 members haven't been particularly helpful. If you're entirely truthful, and if your story proves to be accurate, we'll ensure it has a positive impact on your case and influences the final verdict. I'm more than willing to share everything I know, John responded. After all, while the true criminal remains free, I'm the one you're treating as the primary suspect. Everything started on May 20th, John began. I felt a vibration and heard the distinct sound of a cell phone ringing from my jacket pocket. To my surprise, I retrieved a phone that wasn't mine and instinctively glanced at the screen. It displayed the name, Anonymous, and before I could think it through, I answered the call. The voice on the other end told me that I'd hit the jackpot and could be a millionaire in just 2 months. He introduced himself as the owner, and said that he will be calling me Nachos. He mentioned he was aware of my skill for unconventional tasks and had a 2-month assignment for me, with a reward of $2 million upon completion. I responded that I'd need every detail before even contemplating the offer. He laid out the entire plan, and I must admit, it was flawless. Without hesitation, I agreed, especially given the substantial reward. The following day, I drove to the designated address, which was set to be our hideout. Soon after, 4 others joined me, 2 men and 2 women. None of us shared our real names, instead opting to use the pseudonyms assigned by the owner. They were Muffin, Peanut, Salsa, and Spicy. Naturally, Salsa and Spicy were the women, while Muffin and Peanut were the men. My role was to brief everyone on the plan, detailing their specific responsibilities. I concluded by stating that, upon successful completion of the task in 2 months, each person would receive $1 million. While the plan was involving many details, each step was clear and impeccably crafted. On May 24th, Muffin visited a high-end downtown coffee house named Royal Cafe and applied for a barista position. His exceptional resume and glowing reference letters ensured that within 5 days, he was called in for an interview and subsequently hired. The following day, I visited Royal Cafe myself and requested a meeting with the manager. After a brief wait, Travis, the manager, came out of his office to meet me. I introduced myself as the proprietor of a boutique renovation company and offered Travis a 25% discount on our first project. He took my card, mentioning he'd consider my offer should the need arise. On May 29th, while enjoying the probationary period, Muffin discreetly entered the restroom. Ensuring no one was around, he introduced a substance into the toilets which quickly caused blockages. By evening, when a staff member noticed the problem, Travis was alerted, and soon after, I received his call. He expressed the urgency of needing our services to address the cafe's restroom issues. I assured him we were already on a job but would arrive later, even if it meant working overnight. Gratefully, Travis agreed and awaited our evening arrival to provide guidance and hand over the cafe keys. Peanut and I reached the cafe around 8 p.m. and met with Travis in his office. After inspecting the bathroom, I informed him we'd need until 9 a.m. to finalize everything. This suited Travis fine, as the cafe opened at 10 a.m. Once the cafeteria closed and everyone left the premises, we began our work. Peanut's inclusion in this scheme wasn't random. He was a seasoned plumber and renovation specialist in his other line of work. Our primary objective wasn't the toilets, but rather the wall behind the stalls. We needed to breach this wall and create an opening into the adjoining restroom, which belonged to a neighboring barber shop. Given these were small establishments, neither had security personnel, and naturally, restrooms lacked surveillance cameras. Muffin, leveraging his role as a barista, had accurately measured and documented the wall finishes on both sides to ensure our reconstruction would mirror their original appearances. On the barbershop side, one unique tile featured an integrated handle, which, when manipulated, would reveal a 2-by-4-foot entrance between the 2 establishments. By 8 a.m., our work was complete, and we handed the keys back to Travis, who arrived exactly at 9 a.m. We set the abduction plan in motion on May 31st. As per his routine, Mr. Bates left his home early. Precisely at 7 a.m. James Bates was the CEO of the finance company, Microsoft, a billionaire, and among the city's most influential figures. The owner had precisely gathered all the information regarding Mr. Bates' whereabouts for that day. He revealed that he had spent months surveilling Mr. Bates, capturing his daily routines down to the minute. Such precision was possible, he explained, because affluent individuals often have rigid, consistent schedules. At 9:20 a.m., Mr. Bates' car pulled up to Royal Cafe. Accompanied by 2 guards, he entered to get his regular morning coffee. Given his 3-year patronage at the cafeteria, Mr. Bates no longer had to place an order. The barista on duty knew precisely what to serve him. Our only task was ensuring Muffin worked that particular morning shift, which posed no challenge. While preparing the drink, Muffin unnoticeably added a powder that, within 3 minutes, compelled Mr. Bates to make an urgent restroom visit. 10 minutes prior to this, Peanut and I had entered the neighboring barber shop, seemingly to get haircuts. Pretending to await our turn, within minutes of each other, we made a quick trip to the restroom. Shortly after, I emerged, alerting everyone that a man inside seemed to be suffering a heart attack and that I had already called an ambulance. Within minutes, an ambulance pulled up, and Spicy and Salsa, disguised as emergency medical responders, entered the barber shop. Loudly on the purpose, they ordered me to guard the restroom entrance, ensuring no one interrupted them while they attended to the afflicted individual. Inside, they joined Peanut, all waiting for Muffin's signal that Mr. Bates had entered the adjacent restroom. Back at Royal Cafe, discomfort began to grip Mr. Bates. He informed his guards of his need to use the restroom. One of the guards entered the restroom first to ensure it was vacant. After a brief check, he stepped out, allowing Mr. Bates in. As Mr. Bates headed for a stall, both guards remained stationed at the restroom's entrance. Upon receiving Muffin's signal that Mr. Bates was in the stall, Peanut, with the secret door already ajar on the barbershop side, released a small amount of nitrine dioxide gas through a small opening in the wall. This rendered Mr. Bates unconscious within seconds. Peanut and Salsa swiftly moved Mr. Bates through the hidden door. As Salsa and Spicy made sure he was securely positioned on a motorized bed, Peanut slipped into the Royal Cafe's restroom. There, he opened a small, high window to give the impression that the abduction took place from the building's exterior. He also tossed Mr. Bates' cell phone out of the window for added effect. Concluding his alterations, Peanut returned to the barbershop restroom, carefully sealing the secret entrance behind him. Once inside barbershop's restroom, Spicy and Salsa quickly moved the unconscious Mr. Bates on the motorized bed into the ambulance. I promptly exited the building, with Peanut trailing not far behind. Simultaneously, at the Royal Cafe, one of Mr. Bates' guards, receiving no response after knocking on the restroom door, decided to investigate. Upon entering, he found no trace of Mr. Bates except for the open window. Panicking, he alerted his fellow guard, exclaiming that Mr. Bates had been abducted. Both guards hastily dashed out of the cafe. By then, we were long time gone, on a way to a safe house. There, the owner had placed a bag containing our advance payment for the initial phase of the operation. As per instructions, we left Mr. Bates in the middle of the room tied up to a chair. The owner assured us he would handle Mr. Bates from here on and manage the ransom negotiations. He promised further guidance once those discussions were underway, revealing his aim was a $10 million ransom. The news of Mr. Bates' abduction broke on television that same day and subsequently were reported in the papers the following morning. Over the following weeks, periodic updates on the investigation peppered the news. After weeks without contact from the owner, by early July, we began questioning our continued involvement in the plot. On July 12, the owner finally reached out, reassuring me everything was proceeding as planned. He instructed me to inform the rest of the group that the ransom exchange was scheduled for July 22 and promised to provide additional specifics soon. On July 15, the owner contacted me, confirming that the $10 million ransom had been successfully negotiated and we were set to proceed. He directed us to meet at the safe house at 10 a.m. the following day to receive further instructions, providing us with 6 days to familiarize ourselves with the plan's specifics. He asked to be patient, hinting he might run a tad late due to finalizing some last-minute details that morning. Holding the safe house keys, I came in a bit ahead of schedule at 9:30 a.m. Mr. Bates remained tied to the chair, a black bag covering his face, just as we had left him. By 9:50 a.m., peanut, muffin, salsa, and spicy had all arrived. By 10 a.m., anticipation was intense among us. But at 10:45 a.m., the door burst open, and a SWAT team surged in, catching us totally off guard. They apprehended us all, our mouths agape in shock. And that's where the story leads up to what you know, John concluded. All right, John, the detective began. I suspect there's more you can reveal, but we'll pause for today. This provides a foundation for us to investigate further. Once we've verified this information, we'll continue. Officer, escort him to his cell. As the officer accompanied John out and shut the door behind him, the detective turned his attention to another individual in the room. Mr. Bates, you've heard John's story. Is there anything you'd like to clarify or elaborate on? Mr. Bates replied, honestly, there isn't much more I can offer beyond what I shared already. As you're aware, my entire time I spent tied up to a chair and a bag covering my vision. My last clear memory is of being in the restroom at Royal Cafe. The next thing I knew, I was regaining consciousness, already restrained. At some point, a man entered the room. He provided me with food and water, lifting the bag just enough to expose my mouth while keeping my eyes covered. As a result, I never saw his face. He never identified himself, and in fact, he remained silent throughout. I tried asking him about our next steps and whether money was the objective, but he gave me no response. Seeing the pointlessness in asking more questions, I refrained from further conversations. I concluded that if I was still alive and being cared for, a ransom must have been the motive. Recognizing that such negotiations might be prolonged, I held on to hope and waited patiently. Several times a day, a man would come back and escort me for brief walks around the room, presumably to alleviate the strain of continuous sitting. As usual, he maintained his silence, departing without a word. One day, as he prepared to feed me and my mouth was momentarily free of its restraint, I attempted to scream. In response, he struck me with a heavy object. When I regained consciousness the next day, I found myself back in the chair, nursing a throbbing headache. After that incident, I avoided any further provocations, holding on to hope each day that my suffering would eventually come to an end. Today, I heard the entrance of 5 individuals, one after the other. Their conversation centered on awaiting further instructions concerning the ransom. Hearing this gave me a big relief, giving me hope that this dreadful experience was nearing the end. Shortly after, I heard SWAT teams storming in and, shortly after, a SWAT member came to my rescue, removing the bag from my head and releasing me from my restraints. The subsequent events are already known to you. Indeed, I'm aware of the rest, the detective responded. Thank you, Mr. Bates, for agreeing to come to the police station to hear John's testimony and for providing further details. We'll now ensure you return to the hospital for your concussion treatment. Mr. Bates replied, there's no need, my guards are with me. The detective insisted, for my own peace of mind, please allow our officers to escort your vehicle. The police then escorted Mr. Bates' Escalade, with his guards to the hospital where, upon arrival, Mr. Bates was administered an IV to alleviate his stress and ensure a restful sleep. The next morning, Mr. Bates was woken up by a cheerful voice. James, it's so good to see you're all right. Opening his eyes, Mr. Bates recognized the face of his senior accountant, Michael. Michael, Mr. Bates greeted, thank you for coming. Michael shook his head in disbelief. It's surreal what happened to you. You hear stories like this in the movies. I'm just glad it's behind you and you're safe. Everyone at the office misses you and is eager for your return. In your absence, Blake, our vice president, has been working very hard, ensuring Castle remains in line and operations continue smoothly. Mr. Bates nodded appreciatively. That's good to hear. I'm itching to return to work. Once this concussion heals and I receive clearance, I'll be back at my desk. Now, if you'll excuse me, I anticipate more visitors soon and I need some rest. This headache isn't letting up. Understood, Michael replied. As he neared the door, he paused, turning back with a smile. Remember when you were fussing about that minor cut on your knee after the kitchen mishap? You were concerned about how it'd look at the beach, he chuckled. Considering what's happened now and the scar on your head from the concussion, that knee cut seems rather insignificant, doesn't it? He joked. Indeed, Mr. Bates replied. Had I known what was in store for me, I wouldn't have given that small scar on my right knee a second thought. It's the left knee, Michael corrected gently. I realize the concussion might be muddling things for you right now, James. Take care and recover swiftly. We need our leader back, strong and steering the ship, Michael emphasized. I understand, Mr. Bates responded. Thank you, Michael. I'll be back at the office before you know it. Meanwhile, I'll keep everyone updated on my progress. As Michael departed, a nurse entered the room with a meal tray. Mashed potatoes, steak, and asparagus, prepared just how James Bates preferred. Thank you, Mr. Bates commented. You can leave the tray, but could you bring a steak knife? I'd like to cut the steak into smaller pieces. Shortly after, the nurse returned with the requested knife. Thank you, Mr. Bates repeated. I'll let you know when I'm finished so you can collect the dishes. Kindly close the door on your way out. I'd appreciate some quiet. After the nurse left, Mr. Bates discreetly slid the blanket aside and pulled up the pajama leg on his left side. Swiftly, he took the steak knife and inflicted a deep cut. In a sudden act of distress, he knocked the tray off the bed and collapsed onto the floor, crying out in pain. Guards swiftly entered the room, hurrying to Mr. Bates. I was slicing the steak with the plate on my lap, and the knife slipped, cutting my leg, he explained. As one guard assisted Mr. Bates to his feet, the other rushed to call a nurse. Internally, James Bates grappled with his thoughts. How did this happen? How could I have overlooked this? After 6 years of thorough planning, one inconspicuous scar almost jeopardized everything. I've invested too much to lose it all now. I'm fortunate Michael made that joke today. Gladly, I acted promptly and verified which leg had the scar. His mind drifted back to a conversation, some 7 years prior, when a friend noted, Dylan, have you ever noticed you're a dead ringer for James Bates, the CEO of the electronics company, Microsoft? Prompted by curiosity, Dylan searched for James Bates online and was amazed by their eerie resemblance. It wasn't until 6 months later, however, after losing his job and facing financial turmoil, that a daring idea dawned on him. The feasibility seemed promising. James Bates was only a few years his senior and shared the same blood type. Observing Bates from a distance on the beach, Dylan noted the absence of any distinctive birthmarks. The odds of such a match were astronomical. Moreover, Bates led a rather introverted life, no spouse, no children, just surrounded by guards and household staff. He had even publicly voiced his intention to remain single while he focused on expanding his business into Europe, a venture he referred to as a 10-year project. This suited Dylan just fine. While it might be feasible to mimic someone's public appearance, replicating their intimate habits would be an impossible challenge. With a few subtle cosmetic procedures, a changed hairstyle, and a different hair color, Dylan believed he could pass as James Bates' double. However, could he speak about business and finance with the same skill as James? Since Dylan was financially strapped, the first step was to sell the house he had inherited from his parents. He then needed to determine if he could approximate James Bates' intellectual abilities. While Dylan had always showed an interest in finance, the high-priced costs of post-secondary education had deterred him. Now, using the proceeds from the house sale, Dylan enrolled in a finance program at a local university. Through persistent dedication and summer courses, he earned his master's degree in a mere 5 years. When he not only excelled in his program but also secured an award as one of the top 2 students, Dylan grew confident in his plan's potential. Throughout his studies, he didn't solely focus on finance, he also precisely researched every facet of James Bates' life. Dylan meticulously observed James Bates both on television and in person. He studied James's speech patterns, facial expressions, movements, and every minute detail. Dylan took note of James's tattoos, replicating them on his own body in the exact locations. To mirror James's physique, Dylan dedicated himself to the gym, working out 5 days a week to achieve a matching reflection. Aware of James's appendectomy scar, Dylan intentionally adopted an unhealthy diet to trigger appendicitis, subsequently undergoing the necessary surgery. Seeking anonymity for the next phase of his plan, Dylan traveled to a remote country where he believed his similarity to James would go unnoticed. To disguise his appearance, he grew a beard, mustache and very long hair. While there, he underwent 4 minor cosmetic procedures he deemed necessary to finish his transformation. After his recovery, roughly a year prior, Dylan believed he was primed to initiate his plan. However, around the same time, James Bates was spotted with a woman rumored to be his girlfriend. This unexpected development rattled Dylan. It was the very situation he had feared. The relationship plunged him into a sea of anxiety and forced him to reevaluate his strategy. Fortunately, within a month, it was confirmed that the romance was fleeting, and the couple had parted ways. Upon hearing this, Dylan felt it was imperative to act without delay. Over the past 5 years, he had also immersed himself in tracking criminal activity. Dylan became intimately familiar with crime details, the perpetrators, and their sentences. Additionally, he discreetly joined a local bike group. Despite maintaining a subdued presence and rarely drawing attention, Dylan never missed a gathering. He would attentively listen, taking mental notes, and later document names, events, and all the details. After 5 years of observation, Dylan had compiled a list of 20 individuals he deemed suitable for his abduction plan. While he was familiar with their appearances, he had intentionally avoided showing interest in their phone numbers to avert suspicion. Consequently, when the time came, Dylan had to sneakily plant cell phones in the pockets of each of these individuals, using various tactics depending on the situation, whether on the subway, in a grocery store, or at a traffic light. Subsequently, he adopted the nickname, The Owner, and initiated his grand scheme. Firstly, Dylan himself needed to vanish from the city. This task proved straightforward. He staged a home invasion, making it appear as if he had been abducted during the robbery. Dylan believed it was essential for his acquaintances to hear of his supposed disappearance, ensuring that any potential suspicions about his similarity to James Bates would be dispelled. Planting forensic evidence became a particularly enjoyable endeavor for Dylan, as it allowed him to exercise his creativity fully. He rented a Chrysler 300, a car he deemed suited thieves the best, and drove it to his rental apartment. To simulate a break-in by multiple intruders, he ascended and descended the apartment stairs twice, first wearing men's size 11 shoes and then in size 12. To boost the illusion of theft, Dylan purchased a safe, implying he had valuables. He left the safe conspicuously open and empty at the staged crime scene. To add an element of violence, Dylan bit his lip hard, scattering drops of his blood around the apartment. He chose the lip purposely, ensuring he wouldn't introduce any new visible scars that might be inconsistent with James Bates' appearance. In Dylan's mind, this scene would suggest he had been either pressed for the safe's code or had attempted to resist the burglars. Naturally, for such an occurrence, he left the apartment in a big mess. From this chaotic backdrop, the owner emerged. While this new persona kept James Bates restrained for weeks, Dylan precisely extracted from Mr. Bates the intricate details of his life that he hadn't yet learned. This involved information about James's bank accounts, business accounts, passwords, usernames, social media, and other personal and work-related details, as well as any habits that Dylan might have missed. How could I overlook the possibility of other scars or marks on his body during all this time? The idea to double-check his body hasn't crossed my mind at all, Dylan chastised himself. I'm fortunate Michael's visit pointed it out. Dylan also considered that he might not have captured every nuance of James Bates's life accurately. There could be moments when his portrayal might seem off, and attributing such lapses to the effects of a concussion seemed believable. To set this alibi, he inflicted a contusion on his own head early during the abduction, allowing it to heal by the time everything ended. Then, the day before Nachos gathered the group at the safe house, Dylan ended James Bates's life and disposed of the remains. This act was profoundly disturbing, and Dylan constantly sought distractions whenever his mind threatened to revisit that grim memory. In the morning, Dylan secured himself to a chair, binding his legs to its legs and taping his mouth shut. He draped a black bag over his head and skillfully positioned his hands into a pre-made knot. With a slight spread of his hands, the knot tightened, a trick he had learned during his Boy Scout days. The next step in his plan involved a flower delivery company. Weeks prior, Dylan had ordered flowers to be sent to a detective at the police station nearest the safe house. He used a prepaid MasterCard, which he had deliberately purchased with cash a year earlier. A week before placing the flower order, he sent the shop a sealed envelope bearing the message, "For a future order, we'll call with details." Within the envelope, Dylan briefly described the abduction, his intent to surrender, and the location of the safe house. From a payphone, using a portable voice changer, Dylan called the flower shop. He explained he was working overseas and wanted to surprise his girlfriend, a police detective, with a beautiful bouquet of roses. He inquired about an envelope, asking for it to be nestled within the roses. He scheduled the delivery for 10 a.m., insisting the courier emphasize its urgency and address it specifically to Detective Jay Sparks, who Dylan knew was the lead detective at that station. Dylan calculated the time it would take for the delivery, for Detective Sparks to open the envelope and read the contents, and then for law enforcement to arrive at the safe house. Coupled with the patience of Nachos and the crew waiting at the location, he was confident things would unfold as planned. And they did. Everything transpired exactly as Dylan had anticipated. Though Nachos, Peanut, Muffin, Salsa, and Spice faced numerous sleepless days, it didn't concern Dylan. Their understanding of events greatly differed from the actual truth. What remained was for Dylan to announce that, upon his recovery, he would be leaving his vice president in charge of domestic operations while he will be relocating to Europe to oversee the expansion. Dylan believed starting afresh in Europe was prudent, distancing himself from those who had direct interactions with James. There was also the matter of familiarizing himself with James's medical history and relationships with healthcare professionals such as dentists, massage therapists, the family doctor, etc. To seamlessly transition and replace all of James's medical contacts without arousing suspicion, the move to Europe would play things out perfect. Dreams do come true, Dylan mused. A life of wealth, power, and luxury awaits me. One final adjustment I need to make is responding to the name, James, ensuring I automatically react whenever someone addressed me by my new identity. On the other hand, would it be harder for me to stop turning my head every time I hear, Dylan?
Did you see this twist coming? I won't believe you if you say you did. Should I pitch this to Netflix? What do you think? Tomorrow will be my next video and you will find out that